Well, thank you so much, everybody. It is really a pleasure to be here with you. And I have to say, as I was sitting here this morning, just listening to the 3-minute speeches that were being given, I was hearing a lot of language that I was starting to feel like maybe I found a community that kind of feels a little bit like the one I'm creating too, and maybe we need to talk and see how we can do something together. I was hearing words like alignment. I loved, I'm not sure where she is, right there. You were talking about being a generalist, I believe. Was it you? Right here, being a generalist, and how important that is in today's world as we're going through all of this change. And I also just want to honor Jen, how she ended, where she was talking about the future is not info marketing, the future is humanity and community. How do we create humanity-centric communities? And now that you're speaking my language when you're talking like that. There has never been a more important time to ask ourselves the question, what does it mean to be human? And that sounds like something that you're like, okay, that's obvious. I know, I'll ask that question when I have time or something. But now is the time to ask that question. Because we have all been conditioned, every single person in this room has been conditioned to relate to ourselves over the last 120 or so years as consumers, not people. We have the consumer price index. What are consumers doing today? What are consumers buying? It's almost like we're automatons. We're just, consume. But there's an important thing that's under that. When we ask the question, what does it mean to be human? I want to propose to you today and invite you to consider that the most essential element of what it means to be human is to be a creator. For those of you who are spiritual or religious, you'll remember back in the Old Testament, it said that God made man in his image. What is that image? Image of a creator. So we are by our nature creators, and yet we have existed in a society and been conditioned to put that part of ourselves to the side and just consume. And I don't just mean consuming stuff. I'm talking about consuming energy, consuming space, consuming ideas. Consumption is what happens whenever we go outside of ourselves for the answer. What are other people doing? How can I emulate and copy what they're doing? As a matter of fact, I used to produce this conference, co-produce this conference, I should say, back in 2009, 10, 11. We would bring in some of the top authors and speakers in the world, 200 to 300 of them, for a closed-door session just for them. It was an industry conference. And I noticed that going back then, the info marketing and the consumption of content, the consumption of experiences, the consumption of 3 steps, 7 steps, 10 steps to all your fantasies coming true, all your dreams coming true, that was a big thing. And we're about to move into a different period. So anything that you may have learned if you were part of that generation, it's time to kind of hit the pause button and recognize that you've got to go within and figure out who you are as a creator. Now, the first thing that we all have to take responsibility for as creators is our life. What kind of life have we created for ourselves? So I have this distinction when I teach in our workshops at the Most Important Conversations. We have this workshop called Whole Life Architecture. And it basically, we invite people into a container to look at every aspect of their life and ask, did you consume that or did you create that? Are you living a life by design or are you tolerating a life by default? A life that you just absorbed through your friends, family, community, and the conditioning of your environment. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, have I intentionally, by design, created my life, every aspect of it? Well, in order to answer that question, you have to know who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, then you won't have a reference point to know whether your life is an act of your own creation or an act of consumption, something that you just consumed from the environment around you. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when I was producing these conferences in 2009, 10, and 11, I went to some of the organizers that were working with us and some of the kind of leading thinkers. I mean, we had Tony Robbins at our events, Peter Diamandis at our event, Jack Canfield, Ryan Deiss. I heard his name this morning. He would go to our conference. And I was observing something about human nature in this conference, and I was observing $100 billion a year back then is spent on people trying to change their lives. Presumably, they want to arm themselves with the tools to be a creator of their life. And so they're looking for information, they're looking for people they can connect to, they're looking for experiences that can help elevate who they're trying to create themselves to be in the world. But there was something that was a dark underbelly in that industry, and I wanted to shine a light on it back then. And the dark underbelly is that less than 2% of people who learn this information, who go to these conferences, who buy these books, ever implement or do anything about it. And I thought, well, if we're going to be creators of our own life, if that is the essence of what it means to fundamentally be human, is to access that part, that most essential part of our nature, it's kind of disheartening when you want to be that, but then there's something that stops you from actually being able to be that creator. If less than 2% of people are able to actually enact what they envision in their mind as what's possible to create in their life, what's the thing that is in their way? And then I was just thinking as well, this industry is really trafficking in the failure of people's ability to create the life they want because it creates repeat customers. I mean, if I buy your book and I go to your conference and I get all this information, and then you upsell me to the next tier, and the next tier, and the next tier, but I can't implement any of it, less than 2% of people are implementing it, what is the point of all of this? There's something in the way. Around that same time, I was running an agency, and we were doing some work for a casino in Las Vegas, and I had this opportunity to interface with a lot of the neuroscientists that are really the backbone of Las Vegas. They're the reason it exists. I mean, for all of you who've been to Las Vegas, it's an experiment in human behavior. And I started talking to them, and in that interaction, they explained something to me which I thought was fascinating. And it became the catalyst for the work that I do today and the talk I'm giving today and everything we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. If you can all imagine a slot machine, you'll imagine, say, a slot machine with 3 slots. If they all line up, you win. That's called a win. If they all don't line up, that's a loss. And then they have this term in the middle they call a near loss. So there's a near loss as 2 line up and 1 doesn't. Now the one that doesn't can either be the one that you didn't need, or it could be the one that you needed to get the win. And what they explained to me is that they discovered that when 2 line up and 1 doesn't, that something weird happens in the brain. More dopamine floods through your brain system in that moment than when you actually win. And they're like, if we can recreate this experience, what will happen is people will keep pumping money in the machine because they're getting the neurochemical payoff. They just keep going and going and going. And that's how they keep people hooked. But the aha moment I had was that doesn't just happen in a casino. Imagine the person in line buying the next great book from Tony or any of these great speakers. What's happening is a dopamine hit to the brain. I'm changing my life. I'm finally taking control of my life. Nothing's ever going to be the same again. And guess what? The dopamine is rolling and rolling and rolling. They take that self-help book, they bring it home, and it becomes shelf help. They don't even read it. And that's true. So what was this mechanism? I renamed it the near win. I thought, this is amazing. There's something in our brain that is neurochemically rewarding us to not change, to not do anything different. And we all have it. So I want to just pose something to you that initially you're going to maybe even retract by. All of you in this room, including myself, all of us as human beings, we are all addicts. Now, we don't like to think about that term because we have a cultural idea of what being an addict means, but let me reframe it for you. Being an addict doesn't mean that you have to be doing something that's necessarily damaging or deadly for you. I can be addicted to eating good food. I can be addicted to running and taking care of myself. It's a neurochemical environment thing. So reframe addiction, it's just reinforced behavior. I'm sure Dr. Ryan Williams will be talking about some of the ways that our brain, can get in our way, or it could be our superpower, depending on how present and self-aware we are with this. So we all have this. We all have this near-win mechanism to neurochemically reward us in the moment to not change. Well, if I'm not changing, how am I going to be a creator? Because to be a creator is to lean into the unknown. To be a creator is to lean into spontaneity. To be a creator is to have no fear and to step forward into the new. What we will do as human beings, though, is we go to the past. What did we do before? What have we done before? Bring that, drag that forward. That's just more consuming. We're just consuming our past, bringing it into the present, maybe putting some, new clothes on it to make it feel different, but it's not different. So to be a creator is to be someone who is at peace with the unknown. Now, we're in a business environment right now of a lot of unknowns. And we know our brain doesn't want to change. And so there's going to be all this resistance. Each one of us is experiencing resistance to having to learn new things, do new things. Contemplate the possibility that the way we've thought about business in our life is about to be completely turned upside down. And our brain wants to resist that. It does not want to lean into that change. So, tip number 1 for all of us this morning is to realize that in order to succeed in this moment, we are going to have to go within and truly get who we are and truly step into the power of ourselves as a creator so that we can be at peace with the unknown, so that we can embrace this moment of change, so that we can stop living or tolerating a life by default, and we can create a life by design. So that's the first thing that I wanted to lay out. That's creativity. And we're going to talk, I think, tomorrow about, for those who are here, about creativity in more detail and some of that. The other thing I heard this morning that I think is really important that I want to touch on and amplify a bit is the importance of community. How many of you have heard of the mycelium network, right? So the mycelium network is this network under the ground of mycelium. You can think of them as mushrooms. That's the fruiting part of the body that we see on the top of the ground. But there's this whole communication network for those of you, Fantastic Fungi is a great movie if you really want to kind of look at this. I think it's available on Amazon. And they talk about how the mycelium network is how nature communicates. The trees are even plugged into this network. They speak to one another. We haven't even thought of trees speaking, but now with AI and some of the things that are going on, we're starting to realize that all life is conscious and communicates with one another in some way. Why would we think we are any different? We have created the conditions in our culture for competition and individualism at a level that we're seeing the mental health ramifications of isolation, of anxiety, of stress. And stress is something we experience. There's only one condition that creates stress. It's feeling at a loss of power. Well, how do we center and stay connected to the center of our power? By being a creator. When you're a creator, you're standing in your power because you know you're facing uncertainty, you're facing the unknown, but you know and you trust your power to create a solution and to step forward into that and to have no fear. But if we add community, the mycelium network, to the work we're doing on ourselves as an individual, and then we amplify and connect to one another, that is the future of business, right there. As Jen was saying a few minutes ago. Human beings were meant to be in community. And I think we forget that sometimes. I think over the last even 24 hours, some of the tragic events we've all been aware of was a rupture of community, because it's there whether we realize it or not. And it's this tug of war that we have in ourselves of wanting to remain an individual against everyone else versus collaborating through a creative-based community. We've all heard the changes that AI are bringing. Change, the unknown. I spent the last year researching. I was just curious. I became almost obsessed with it. I started reading all of these different consulting company predictions. McKinsey, Deloitte, EY, Microsoft, Google, they're all putting predictions about where this is going, where AI is going. And they're not prophets. This isn't the truth. It's just a guess. The guess is anywhere from we're going to see 30% displacement of jobs as a result of AI. I just heard I'm part of an online group of AI tech executives and experts. We actually have Nolan Bushnell, who invented Atari, as part of the group. It's called Brain Juice. And we were talking the other night, someone said, actually, there's a new study, and they posted in the group, that 90% displacement as a result of artificial intelligence. And as Jen was saying earlier, yes, and more jobs will be created. So I started thinking, where are those jobs going to come from? According to Pew, 90% of Americans are employees. They're W-2. 10% are self-employed or entrepreneurs. If you're an attorney or you're an accountant or you're an IT professional or you're an engineer, these are all jobs that are going to be transformed massively and are going away. And so it's not like you can just exit the company that you're an employee of and walk up at the street and just get another job. Those days are over. So what's going to happen to the 90%, 10%? Many of the people in the 90% are going to be looking at becoming self-employed and entrepreneurs. How many of you have ever been an employee for a company at one point in time? And how many of you are still an employee of a company? Okay, so a little mixed. I want to invite those of us who've gone through the entrepreneurial journey to remember what it was like back then when you chose to be a creator and to create your own path, to create your own company, and all the emotion and all the uncertainty and all the unknown and all the things that you had to learn and everything that you had to go through. But you got to choose when you did it, how you did it. People who are let go of their jobs, they're not going to get that choice. They're going to be faced with, I got a mortgage, I got car payments, I got kids' college, I got all this stuff. Maybe I get a severance package that takes me 6 months to a year, maybe, depending on where I was in the company. But they're going to be forced into having to become a creator when they've been conditioned as a consumer their whole life. And we were all conditioned the same way. So my work and the work that we're doing in the most important conversations is to find a way to create a community model to absorb people who are losing their jobs and need to know, how do I become an entrepreneur? How do I become a creator? I mean, we're talking about a total transformation of the mind and the spirit. And they can do it, but they're not going to be able to do it, coming back to where I started this story, without community. We owe it, every single person in this room, owe it to everyone in your life and to each other to start finding ways to work together, to start finding ways to collaborate together, to start finding ways to create together. We owe it, for those of you who are coaches and are helping to address the mental health crisis. By the way, I think we're on the verge of a mental health crisis, the likes of which we are unprepared for right now. The systems and structures we currently have in our society are not prepared to handle the tsunami of people with no hope, no direction, and no creative experience to know what to do next. And when humans get like that, they get feral and they get mean and they get defensive. And so it's not time to think about it 2 years from now. It's time to think about it right now. Who in your life, whether they are an employee or not, and if they are an employee, maybe they haven't lost their job yet, but it's time to start having these conversations, what I call the most important conversations. What does it mean to be human? And how are you going to step into your power as a creator? And how are you going to connect to a community to make sure that the people in your life are not left behind? We have that opportunity right now. And so we all have to think. I just invite you all right now to think about people in your life. They might be in your family, your friends, your colleagues. They need to be in rooms like this, learning the things that we are learning, having the kind of conversations we are having. And I know that because of the near win, their brain's going to try and talk them out of that, not do that, and neurochemically reward them to just keep doing what they're doing. But we have to be a force for good in their lives. Otherwise, we're not a mycelium network. Otherwise, we're just on our own individuated path, trying to win at a game that is fundamentally being transformed right in front of our eyes right now. We don't know what the future will look like. We have speculation, projection, but it's a big unknown. And the last thing I want to leave you with is yourself. What do you do to go deep and to puncture the attachment that you have to your life looking a certain way? What do you do to challenge your assumptions? What do you do to challenge your worldview? And who do you do that with? Are you in those kind of conversations? Some of us we're here because of that, but in your own communities, in your own families. And it begins with you. So are you working on yourself? I always say to business owners that we work with, the most important work you can do is the work you're doing on yourself. All the business stuff is still important, the tactics, the technologies, the people, all of that's important. I've heard a lot of conversation already this morning about alignment. What are you aligned with? Do you know the person that you were aligned with? There's an old Buddhist proverb. It asks the question, who were you when you were born? Who were you when you were born, not who are you as a conditioned self today? That's an inquiry that we all need to make. And when we start there, we'll find that we have the intrinsic power to lean into an unknown future, to not be overwhelmed by anxiety and stress because we're standing in our creative power, to invite others into that so that we can journey with them and they with us. I first actually thought about this concept many, many years ago. I was sitting at the dinner table, and there was like 6 of us around the dinner table. I don't know why this hit me this way, but I thought, wow, this is super interesting. Where I am sitting on the dinner table, the experience I'm having and what I am seeing and the direction I'm looking is the truth to me. It is what I am seeing. What they're seeing is, I am not seeing that, but it's the truth to them. Too often we want to create a bubble around ourselves that we know the truth. And we want to diminish someone else's perspective. And I thought in that moment when I was looking around the table, I thought, this is super interesting. We were designed for community. I can't know what they're seeing, and they can't know what I'm seeing unless we talk to each other, unless we communicate, unless we share. And so none of us will ever have access to the whole truth. We all have parts of it, and if we communicate and talk together, we can get closer to what that might be. And so it's actually been a disadvantage for us as a society to be isolated from one another. I was in Bali about 18 months ago for about 3 months. Have anyone been to Bali before? One person back there? So I was in this town called Ubud, which is in the center of the island, and it's kind of known as the spiritual Mecca. And they have like 1 or 2 streetlights, but there's like 500,000 people in this little town. 1 or 2 streetlights, if you can imagine. And it was remarkable being there because I was immediately thrust into a world that is community-centric in a way that I had never experienced before. The driver who picked us up from the airport, who ended up being our driver the whole 3 months, his name's Wayan. Of course, actually in Indonesia, it's interesting. They only have, I think, for males, 5 names. So I can't remember them all, but Ketut and Wayan, and there's only 5 of them. So, and then you have your family name, which is how they distinguish you. So anyway, his name was Wayan, and he ended up being our driver. But the first day he picked us up, he invited us to his village. We just happened to be there during Indonesia's New Year, and which was in April, I think, early April. And so he invited us to his village, and he said, just come, and we're going to have huge celebrations and everything. And I witnessed them having like the coconut shell flame-throwing contest where these kids light this pile of coconuts on fire, and then like instead of snowballs, they're whipping flaming coconuts at each other. And they have music, and they have a parade and all this stuff. And then as Wayan would drive us around in this 2 streetlight, 500,000 person town, I was noticing how chaotic it seemed. It's like you get to an intersection and everyone's sort of snaking and trying to figure out who's going to go and when, because there's no traffic control. It's just you're just cars and scooters and vans going in every direction. But then I noticed something else was going on. They were looking at each other, because mostly it's scooters there, and they were acknowledging each other. They knew each other. They were waving to each other. They were engaged with each other, just turning the corner through this malaise of humanity. I came back from Bali, and I'm sitting in my car in my little individuated bubble, and I'm sitting at a streetlight. And I look across, and there's another car and another human sitting in their individuated bubble staring at the streetlight, and another one to the left of me. And in front of me was a streetlight with a camera and a sensor and everything, and I thought, this is so fascinating. We're all in these individual bubble worlds. I don't know this person, he doesn't know me, and we're waiting for machines to tell us what to do, to tell us when to go and when not to go. And we've removed the humanity out of that system. And it's smooth and it runs, it's organized, but there's no life in it. And so the invitation this morning is for all of us to connect to the life inside us, the essential nature of who we are, the created self. Then the invitation is to do that work, and then the invitation is to connect to one another powerfully in community. And to bring this together, it will amplify your businesses. Your businesses will succeed like they never have before, and you'll be able to weather the storm. If we are not in community and we're isolated trying to weather the storm that is already here, it's not coming, it's already here, we will not survive that individually. And so this morning, think about your friends, think about your family, think about the people in your life who are just not paying attention to this right now. And there's a reason. They're getting a neurochemical payoff to do nothing. I want to leave with one quick story. I have 20 seconds. There was a study done in 2005. This just will seal the point, of heart attack patients. And these were people who had a heart attack and were told if you don't make substantive lifestyle change to your diet, exercise, sleep, in 5 years, statistically, you will either have another heart attack or you will be dead. And when they went back to those people after 5 years, they discovered something astonishing. Less than 10% of them made any change at all to their lifestyle. That means 90+% did nothing. If you won't change to save your life, forget about starting that great business, making more money, all that, that's not going to matter. So the only way we can change is together. We have to bind together. And that's what I want to leave you with this morning.